So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rodney to get started.
Thanks, Amanda. Hello, everyone. I would love to be seeing you all in person, of course, but hopefully in the near future, we can make that happen. I think Amanda did a really excellent job of beginning to introduce True Central. Our team, our global intelligence team, has been focused for the last 7 weeks on developing data sets and perspectives on the human truth and the human experience in this time of coronavirus. If you don't know True Central, we have been in operation for about 8 years, focused on a whole range of topics that are meaningful to the brands that we work with, not only in local markets, but at a global scale as well. And we really try to uncover an understanding that looks at the cultural and human lens of attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors around topics that are critical to the businesses that we consult with. The methodology of this particular project is unique. We kicked off our first wave of research in March, prior to the lockdowns in many places, particularly in Europe, although Italy and Spain had sort of had an advanced, mature experience with the crisis at that point. We have since repeated that quantitative survey in all the markets that you see here for 3 waves. We've just completed our 4th wave. We're about to publish that content. I'm not going to speak to that today. I'll speak through the first 3 waves. One of the products that is coming out of that data set is a global pandemic journey map. And what we're looking at is this sort of transition across these phases of crisis. And this particular map is built from an understanding that comes from anthropology and sort of the ways in which human societies have experienced culture across time. And we are recognizing that in this particular crisis, all countries have sort of moved from a discovery phase, often paired and coupled with denial, into a panic phase, which is a lot about stockpiling. A lot of the ways in which people lack of understanding also takes place in the political sphere and panic. And then we move and shift into an adaptation where new behaviors a lot of those, which I'll speak about today, come to the surface, and large masses of people are taking those on. And then shifting into a renewal phase. And we believe that some markets like China are moving into that renewal phase, and at some point we'll be beyond this crisis. So we're tracking these countries as they move across this journey. As you can see over the waves, they've sort of shifted, and sort of like more of our markets are moving into renewal. A lot of this is an understanding of preparedness and worried, the sense of worry that people have about the coronavirus. So as you can see in most markets, the worry around the outbreak has increased sort of from wave to wave. But what has sort of correspondingly decreased is a sense of security or confidence if an individual is to catch the coronavirus. So across all of our markets in Europe and globally, we see that people are less and less confident that they'll actually be able to confidently move through this crisis and this public health crisis. Of course, it's not just a public health crisis. I've referred to a political crisis that is surfacing. It is clearly an economic crisis. Many of us are witnessing or have been impacted in this way. And then, of course, a psychological crisis, which we believe is going to sort of outlast all of these other crises. We're tracking those. We're building our protocols in order to track those across our markets. Now, it's not all terrible. Of course, there are some benefits that people see, sort of upsides to the COVID-19 outbreak. And these are really sort of very human experiences of what this condition and set of circumstances is impacting us to do. That's considering what matters in life, spending more time with our families. We've all witnessed the decrease in carbon emissions, the sort of return of nature, as people are speaking about, and then some sort of playfulness around the sort of generation of creative memes, and then, of course, a focus on faith for some people. So today I'm going to walk you through an overview of the larger project, and I'm going to talk about the sort of 5 truths that we believe that sort of organize human life. These are universal. We share these, the truth of connection, love, discovery, purpose, and success. We're using that as a filter to understand the ways in which people are responding to the crisis and how the crisis is impacting these human truths. I'll start with connection. As I mentioned, I'm going to give you a snapshot of each of these truths. We are doing a deep dive into each of these truths in the subsequent series. So if you are a brand or a business that is focused on connections or on love or discovery, we will have a much richer data set and story to share with you, should that be relevant to you. When it comes to connection, I just want you to think that about 2 months ago, few of us had heard the phrase social distancing, or physical distancing as we now call it, self-isolation, quarantining. This vocabulary that has now become everyday was not on the tip of our tongues just 2 months ago. Local cultures have, in fact, in the response to social distancing, have generated a local lexicon. So we have police hour in Serbia, cocooning in Ireland, shielding in the UK, strict lockdown in Poland. So different cultures are manifesting and materializing language to interpret this situation uniquely. What we do see across the board is the sort of incidence of people just staying away from public places. So the language happened, then the behavior came. So this is pretty incredible for anyone who studies human behavior to witness a readiness to take up a new behavior by large portions of the population, the global population, pretty readily and pretty quickly. This readiness to take up a new behavior sometimes conflicts with long-standing behaviors. So, for instance, anthropologists have looked at the ways in which personal distance was measured in different cultures. So say you are in Romania, for instance. In Romania, what we see is that within a 3 feet distance, it's comfortable to have your sort of intimate relations and your acquaintances within 3 feet, but strangers you sort of hold a little bit further apart. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, almost everyone aside from your intimates is beyond 3 feet, so you keep a wide distance. Whereas in Argentina, everyone is pretty close. Within 3 feet, you would have strangers, your intimates, your acquaintances, all of them really comfortable at such a close distance. So this suggests that there is going to be an implication for the ways in which people respond to social distancing and physical distancing, and the impact that's going to have on a psychological level, an emotional level, on a cultural level. In fact, The Guardian has raised this question recently around something that is called touch hunger or skin starvation. This is a psychological condition in which you are craving the sort of touch, the hug, the handshake, the pat on the back that we were so recently treated to, and we have long been accustomed to, now all at a remove from us. But the human need for connection is impossible to silence, and we love looking across the world at all these ways in which people are creating these ingenious ways to connect. This is an example from Italy, an amazing set of people who are on their balconies somehow managed to rig a bamboo, enabling them to have a toast of Prosecco across the narrow street between their houses. It's a really incredible, ingenious way of connecting. Another really impressive operation is United We Stream, which was a response to the devastation that the lockdown has had on the club scene in Berlin in particular, but is also a platform for club scenes around the world. So DJs are hosting nightly sets, and on weekends, longer sets, so you can sort of have an all-weekend rave on United We Stream. But it's a way to ensure that those individuals who are involved in that industry remain active. They're bringing the delights and the joy and the connection that they had always promised back to life in this digital environment. Of course, we know that the pandemic has launched a million memes, such a creative tool for connecting. We know from Gen Z, the research that we're doing across the world with young people, that memes are a fundamental way of connecting, of expressing culture, of responding to culture, and particularly to circumstances that are not in one's control. So you can see that 1 out of 5 young people in Europe say that one of the key benefits of the outbreak is that there's going to be a lot of good memes. And it's, there's such creative dynamism, and, it's obviously cultivated by culture and sub-segment within the young youth population, but there's a lot of energy behind this, and it's a creative energy that I think in the creative industry we can take lesson from and be inspired by. Of course, digital connections alone are not enough. People who suffer from anxiety, as this respondent does, know that this virus is making them isolate indoors, But that's only part of the problem. Not only are you isolating, but also creating paranoias and phobias and worries above and beyond that. So a real damage to the sense of trust and confidence that one has socially. In fact, 1 of 3 people across the region are concerned that vulnerable people will become more isolated during this time. And that's particularly a high incident in the UK, where more than half of the population believes that to be true. So the truth is as the pandemic spreads, people are at once more connected and more isolated than ever before. And the implication here is really to think about how organizations can continue to bring people together in ways that build genuine connections, promote an exchange of ideas, and ensure we're still having fun and staying healthy along the way. Xbox is doing an excellent job of sort of hitting the right tone. Obviously, gamers are really turning to these platforms in this particular context. And Xbox and Microsoft are really responding in a way that is hitting the right tone, speaking the language of the users, and really getting in there and being a partner in this context. Next, I'll shift into the human truth of discovery. Of course, discovery is tantamount to the success of our overcoming of this crisis. Researchers, the best minds in the world, are putting their brilliance to solve this problem, come up with a vaccine or a treatment. And then this is, of course, creating a lot of alliances around the world. So paywalls being knocked down in order to allow academics to share the results, publishing findings faster than is normal. So really transforming the ways in which the discovery process takes place in science. In fact, the German district, the sort of ground zero in Germany, it became a laboratory for the global community as they looked to understand the dynamics of spread and cluster outbreaks within that particular district, and that became a model for global communities everywhere. But for many of us, it's about discovery at home and sort of spending so much time at home. And for Europeans, having a happy home really means having a happy life. And this is an important lesson that Europeans tell us they want to instill in their children. But the number one lesson that they would like to instill in their children is to never stop learning. So you have this coupled, happy home, never stop learning, bring those together, and you have some magic happening here. So people are taking up new hobbies. 1 out of 6 people have started a new hobby. I imagine many people here in this room listening to us have done so. I'd love for you to just enter your new hobby into the chat. We'd love to know a little bit what you're learning and discovering. Of course, media is opening up the doors, so platforms enabling, free access to books. And then the Getty Art Challenge. This is a really fantastic challenge that the Getty Institute in the United States put out into the world. There are lots of these museum challenges, but this is one that we particularly loved. Find a portrait, take some props in your home and recreate it. So our global True Central team has recreated this, and you see all of us here in different guises. And then our strategists across the region, you see Amanda, in fact, is in one of these images. But there's a great creativity and discovery of art and connection that is possible through this. So the truth is, this crisis unleashed astonishing creativity and innovation. During the last recession, for instance, unicorn companies like Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb were born. And we know that if looking historically, that the number of patents, for instance, in the United States peaks every time there is a major crisis, whether that's a financial crisis in particular, or that might have something to do with, as sort of, for instance, at 9/11 in 2001. So the implication really is, how can brands continue to learn from their consumers during this pandemic to ensure that the crisis is a springboard for longer term innovation? I'll now turn to success, the human truth of success. I think when this crisis and this lockdown began, many of us were hearing those stories of how Shakespeare wrote King Lear during his during the plague. And this sort of urge to become incredibly productive in this context. There was, of course, a backlash against this. It's not just that we're working from home these days. We're working from home during a crisis and trying to work, right? So really trying to balance what success looks like in this context. So the parameters of success are truly evolving. Just things like, I managed to go to the supermarket without having a meltdown, or putting on makeup for the first time during a week, really sort of chalking that up to being a success. course, there's all sorts of inventive solutions that are coming to surface. Many individuals are creating masks, really inciting things happening in Ireland and Italy, where particular manufacturers of scuba equipment are transforming those into sort of PPE. So really exciting sort of options for success in overcoming this virus. But for many people, it's just about the fundamentals, things like hygiene. Just making sure that you get through this crisis without contracting the COVID-19. So many people are taking extra measures to boost their immune system. So that's a pretty incredible rate. People doubling the amount, double the amount of people boosting their immune system in this context. Of course, education is a critical area of focus when it comes to thinking about success today. So Minecraft sort of steps into the game, creates a platform for education. Google has enabled teachers all over the world with this hub, Teach from Home, which is a clearinghouse of information, of tools, helping teachers, helping parents to get through this crisis of homeschooling with success. Of course, the most fundamental question that many people are asking, particularly in Europe, is the question around the economy and financial or economic success in the future. We all know that the world faces the worst recession since the Great Depression. Increasingly, people are worried about losing their job in all of our markets across the region. And there's a double bind, right? So there's this particular individual from the UK who tells us, you know, I have a common cold, but I'm being treated like I have the plague. So I'm just keeping myself away from the madness. Well, this is difficult because I'm a casual worker and have no sick leave. I feel like I have let down the people I support, but I don't want to get them sick either. So you can see that sort of public health and economic crisis impacting the life of an individual. And so really success here is double-fold. And that's really important in this context where people are looking to their employers to support them. And increasingly people are really noticing the actions of particular employers and highlighting and showcasing them. So for instance, Columbia Sportswear, the CEO of that company, you might know it's an American sporting goods brand. The CEO cut his own salary to $10,000 for the year in order to continue providing regular pay to all of his employees across the company. So the truth is there's a collective reappraisal of social and economic life, and the metrics of success are in a state of redefinition. So really, how do brands learn from this and respond to these new measures of success that are really being born out of this particular crisis? And how do they balance the need to reflect reality while offering hope and an aspirational future? A partnership that we are really inspired by is one between Aldi and McDonald's. McDonald's, many of their retail outlets closed in Germany, so many of those employees being furloughed. Well, at the same time, Aldi, obviously the demands on its supply of labor and resource are greater than ever. So they've set up a partnership to employ these furloughed McDonald's employees in the warehouses and deliveries distribution network of Aldi in Germany. A really inspiring partnership. Now, turning to purpose, people are definitely stepping up in this time of crisis. We've all seen these images of healthcare professionals, sort of the challenges that they bring to that they're facing in sort of with their determination to overcome this public health crisis. One of our agencies in Belgrade created this homage, this honor to those healthcare workers, and we love it because it reminds us that that idiomatic expression, which is not all heroes wear capes. And in fact, sort of combining the fact that Batman, Spider-Man, and Robin are all here before us, but they're wearing the guise of PPE and doctors and nurses. Of course, companies like L'Oreal have pivoted to find meaning and purpose in this context. One of the first companies to pivot and produce hand sanitizer in response to the crisis. This has, of course, become a common practice around the world for companies in health and beauty, but also in alcohol and spirits, looking at the ways in which they might be able to provide some relief to those supply chains. Of course, this is a great opportunity for reflection. We are calling it the Great Reset. And this quote from a British respondent who told us, "The thought of never being able to see my family and friends again made me realize," this is really important, we're realizing these things that matter, "how short and precious life is. I hope I will never forget that lesson." So really consolidating our sense of understanding around our personal purpose. And people across the region are really taking time to consider what matters in life. Um, and one Italian student told us, "It's really simple. These aren't big, grand purposes, but my everyday purpose. I miss the simple fact of waking up tired with billions of things to do and doing them in the company of the people with whom I spend part of my life. I hope to be able to keep this new gift of appreciating life that coronavirus has made me realize." Again, the realization, the appreciation, the gratitude of this gift despite the challenge, really showcasing human resilience and determination in this context. So when it comes to purpose, the great reset that the coronavirus has inaugurated is a shift in the roles that we each play in our public, professional, and personal lives. And the implication is, how do brands, businesses, and organizations recalibrate their meaningful role across the pandemic journey and well into the recovery phase? Cigna stepped forward very quickly. This is a global healthcare provider. They have provided, they've waived fees for their members. They are supporting healthcare professionals. They are enabling the transfer of information. So really looking at all the ways across the ecosystem to play a meaningful role when it comes to the health and well-being of populations across the world. Now, lastly, I'm going to look at love and our human truths. And this particular story is one that really caught our attention. An Italian man who told us, "Look, unfortunately, the coronavirus has had a big impact in my life as I live in Italy and we're all grounded. For me, the biggest impact has been the fact that this month I won't be able to meet a very special person for me who lives abroad and can't fly to Italy as flights have been canceled." I think many of us have had that experience now where our loved ones are at a distance that's a bit too far. Of course, we're also reading about things like COVID divorces and corona babies. So we know that in China, the incidence of divorce after the lockdown rose exponentially. And we're looking to see this happen in many other places, whether the positive outcome of a corona baby or the less positive outcome of a COVID divorce. Of course, another outcome of this crisis has been a rise in racism, scapegoating and blame. So looking to assign responsibility for this crisis. And that's definitely in the media on a daily basis, looking for the source and the reason for the challenge. 1 in 8 people in Europe, in fact, are concerned that people will become more racist as a result of the coronavirus, rising to 1 out of 5 in Germany. But we know that love finds a way. One great example is that Animal Crossing has become a platform to host all kinds of events. In fact, one of the platform's employees in the UK, in London, her daughter's birthday was coming up. She hosted a virtual birthday party on a beach in Animal Crossing. And her daughter was thrilled by this. So really providing an opportunity to show that love and bring people together through the digital means that we have access to. So the truth is our personal relationships are being intensified for better or worse under these restrictions. However, it is an enduring human truth that compassion is a key tool in overcoming crisis. The implication really is as people foster relationships in new circumstances, all types of organizations have the opportunity to support, guide, and inspire us with actions to strengthen our bonds of love. One instance of this is a campaign that began in the United States by Verizon, I Stay at Home For, and this has been replicated in markets around the world, people demonstrating their love for their loved ones by staying at home, the very simple act of staying at home and abiding by the lockdown. That was a very quick whistle-stop tour through our 5 human truths, a broad overview of what we're working on. And as I said, we're going to go deeper into each of these truths with a much broader perspective on the implications of the coronavirus on those truths. Thanks so much. I'm now going to hand over to Adina. She's going to share perspective from the Romanian experience. And we've had some good conversations around the sort of difference and the similarities, the commonalities of this experience. And I'm really excited for what she's about to share with you.
Just while we wait for Adina to load her presentation, I'm just going to remind everybody that the chat function is open for questions as well. I noticed a few questions have appeared there already, which we'll save for the end. But if anyone else has any further questions, please do use the chat function to type them as the guys are going through their presentations. Feel free to type the questions there. Okay. We also had plenty of people join after I did the initial intro. So thank you very much for joining us. I know that we've got clients, colleagues from various different places. So thank you. And like we said at the beginning, if you have follow-up questions, then please get in touch with us afterwards. And we're, like Rodney said, each of those 5 human truths areas has a corresponding deep dive to it that we can talk you through in more detail following today's session. So please get in touch with your client services person or with myself or any of us here at McCann, and we'll be more than happy to talk you through each of those different sections in more detail. Okay. Adina is here, I know that much. Okay. Rodney, we have a couple of specific questions on your presentation. Maybe you can just answer a couple of these as we go through. One is about how you see the difference between global and local brands as we move into the next phase of the next phases of the pandemic. And I know one of the first things you talked about was the phases. And when I've heard you mention it previously, I've found it interesting that you've said it's not necessarily going to be a linear journey through those different phases. And, you know, for example, if we go into another lockdown, maybe we'll go back to different phases. So you look like you're agreeing with that it might not be a linear process.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Amanda. I think we're witnessing it to some extent in markets like Japan. We sort of recognize that, you know, a successful lockdown initially is now being met with subsequent outbreaks. So I really do think that there are ways in which global organizations are going to have to learn from their local markets. If you are a global brand, so there's going to have to be a real calibration between local and global in that context. But local brands are, you know, very well equipped to understand the local context. But I do think it's really important to look at the models of other countries who are on a different phase of this journey map and learn those lessons. I think early on we saw, you know, China, South Korea, Japan going through this crisis long before sort of Italy and Spain experienced their outbreaks. We missed a beat, I think, in understanding and learning from those markets quickly and scaling what those key lessons were. So I think we're getting better, and I think brands and organizations are increasingly looking to other countries on this journey who are further along, like Germany, for instance, and trying to understand and learn from their success.
Yeah, it was interesting as well when you mentioned some of the things that we'd learned from Asia, who were obviously ahead of Europe again. And I know Adina's been working with, been having a lot of conversations with researchers in Asia as well to find out not just what they found, but how they went about doing research in this time, because it's obviously a time that's thrown everybody into sort of new ways of working, particularly with the working from home initiative everywhere. And I know from a research perspective, especially for an anthropologist, it's pretty difficult time to observe these human behaviours and uncover these truths, which is why I think the work that your team have done in 7 weeks is pretty impressive. One of the other questions that we had was around a specific category, and you mentioned L'Oreal as one of the examples. But around the health and beauty sector, and if there's, you know, a number of those different human sort of truths and motivators that you talked about, from love through to purpose, and how these brands have adjusted and pivoted, as you called it. But how else do you see the impact maybe on health and beauty?
Well, I definitely see the remit for many of these organizations. In fact, I think for most companies, there's an increased understanding of the role that company and the potential of that company to play in the healthcare space. So sort of understanding what is the native meaningful role of that organization, and then how that can translate into the healthcare space. So yeah, I hear
me.
Yeah.
Yes, we hear you, Adina.
Oh, good. I don't know what happened, so I'm sorry.
Adina, do you want to talk us through a little bit of the methodology that you've taken? As I was just saying,
yeah, I will skip some slides with this opportunity. So first of all, you guys, I'm very much used to talk to public and see your faces and so on and get a lot of energy from that. But I will use my memory lane like people are doing today. If you can put it on slideshow, it would be great because it's more visible. Beatrice?
Yes.
So I will use my memory lane of your faces and giving me a lot of positive energy and so on in order to be able to transmit as well energy and emotion through the voice. Because it's very important to focus on my presentation. The focus of my presentation today is to get you along with me in this story of people throughout the lockdown in Romania and the way they felt while being in lockdown and the discoveries that they had. Like Rodney was talking a lot about discoveries and love and connections and so on. How the public in Romania actually took this. I would like Beatrice to help me with moving the slides to the research challenge. You can help me?
Yes, just a second that it's not moving.
Ah, super.
Adina, you can also request control yourself.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know how to do it, so maybe you can help me like that. So, okay. So the idea was, with us, the researchers, we faced, like all the businesses, a lot of challenges with staying connected with the people, because our job is actually this one, to stay as much connected with the people as possible and be able to know what's going on in every moment. So for you guys to know exactly what to do in real time. So after the lockdown, we were saying like, okay, we need to run research now, exactly now, because it's a crisis and people are changing and we need to stay there connected to them. And we kind of created a solution for staying in contact with people, especially in terms of methodology and online discussions. And unfortunately, the whole market was frozen. So we looked for partnership, and we were fortunate enough for MECAN to offer us their partnership. As always, true partnership comes in hard moments, in difficult moments. So it was very helpful for us to have them joining, for them to join us in this journey. We created two tools to work with research during the crisis, and these two tools are presented in the next slide. One is called the Insight Meter, and the other one is Beatrice. Request control. Request. I think I can move it.
Okay, now you have it. I was trying to press, but still it's slow.
Okay, I hope it's working.
Yay.
Okay.
I think you're going too fast now.
No, I'm going fast. So these are the two products that we created during the crisis. Yeah, I'm going too fast. One, it was called the Crisis Insights Meter. I'm going too fast now. I'm really sorry for this. So. What do you guys see now?
We are on the behavioral and attitudinal consequences slide.
Mm-hmm.
You were trying to click back?
Yes.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah, you control it, please.
Mm-hmm.
So, coming back, these are the two products that we created. One is focusing on qualitative and quantitative measurements of the insights that we gather from people from qualitative studies. And the second one is it's an online diary, a community that we built it together with these people that we talked in the Crisis Insight Meter. And we asked them to post every day a positive and a negative experience about their life during the lockdown. It was this, let's say, image of a cocooning while the lockdown, and of a worm turning into a butterfly. And we wanted to be there to see what is going on. And what we found out, I'm going to share with you now some numbers, some percentages, some figures about the changes that we faced, the things that we found out. These are data collected in April, so it's the second wave of research. What we have discovered is that if at the beginning of the lockdown, 30% of the people said that they work from home, in April, this percentage increased with 20%. So almost half of the people that we interviewed work from home. The majority of the news they took from online, and especially official websites in online. And most of the news they got were taken also from the family and friends. And these numbers increased in time. Why we look at the dynamic? Because this might give us an indication of the sources of information and the way you get to people in the future. Social media was not that present anymore among the sources of information to them. So if we move to the next slide, you're going to see that the most important worry, I think the next slide is about the worries. The most important worry throughout the whole measurement was the financial one. It was the same in March and the same in April. Only that the hierarchy of the next worries changed from one wave to another. If in March, for example, people were very much worried about their health situation, in April, the health issue came down. I mean, because the pandemic in Romania was kind of controlled, that these people felt that we were not that, the situation was not that difficult like in other countries. And the worry that came out was the worry related to spending spare time. In a few words, people got very bored. And they actually finalized all the activities that they could have in the house, and they were really anxious to start doing something more fun. If we move to the next slide, you're going to see that another worry is related to maintaining the social relationship. Romania is a country full of very warm people where family matters a lot. And we have met kids or families saying that kids and grandparents miss each other a lot. And not only that, the kids were missing also their colleagues, their companions, other kids to play with. So lots of void of positive energy coming from social and natural social interactions and also social relationships. And if we move to the next slide, you're going to see that we also investigated, of course, things that matter to the business is like how the consumption patterns are going to change. And we put here only some of the data. We have a huge amount of data related to consumption. But what was interesting to us to see in April, after the second wave, was the fact that the categories that they say that they will cut a lot on in the first wave got a little bit of revival in the second one, like clothes and electronics and furniture or beauty services. As they are preparing to stop the lockdown, you know already probably that beauty salons are already booked for 2 weeks in advance, and people actually start to think about clothes because they got fat. It's like 3 kilos the minimum, they say. And getting fat is not only that, but in the meantime, during the lockdown, we missed one season. You know, it's like when we wanted the lockdown, it was winter, and now it's already summer. So obviously, people will need to revise their clothing provisions and stocks. But there are categories which decreased from one wave to another, which are cigarettes and alcohol. I know that there are data that show that the consumption is increasing, but it's not really, it's increasing in the sense of people buying more in the house, but they do not consume outside. They say that actually their level of consumption is pretty constant or going down because they might have been consumed a lot at the beginning of the lockdown, but in the meantime, their routine got really organized and they realized that they will go out. They have to have a stronger immune system. They need to lose some pounds. They need to be fit and so on. So they even think about the importance of keeping a healthier life and maintaining a healthier life for investing in their immune system. And also another one is the gasoline and car expenses, because they would really like to diminish the consumption of gasoline and of traveling by car, especially because summer is coming. Of course, there is another issue of public transportation and not going to public transportation because it's not safe, so car is safer. But still, there are some changes coming up in the cars market, we assume, like buying cars, but cars that really protect the environment. So, or moving from one place to another in a different manner than with a car. If we move to the next slide, you're gonna also see that there are some changes in behavior and attitudes on short term and on longer term. On short term, people say that they already did that. They recycled more during the lockdown in order to avoid waste and also take care of the environment. This gain with the anti-pollution, the clearing the air, was actually a gain that they felt really positive about. Will invest much more and already did that, buying much more local and Romanian products in order to invest in the economy and save the Romanian economy by investing in local products. Again, they assume that people will interact in a different manner in the future months to come. And about the hugs that Ronnie was talking about, they might choose to postpone them even if they long for those hugs. And another thing that came out but didn't grow was the fear of criminal activities increasing. But it stays pretty cool, so it's not really growing. In terms of longer time consequences, one major discovery that people in Romania did, I was comparing the data with the data that Rodney showed in other countries. And there, people were talking a lot about interactions and so on and having fun. I think that one of the main discoveries that Romanians have done is their love for nature and very simple things. You know, even in our kitchen, our dishes are very simple ones. And many of them were talking about longing for nature contact or contact with the nature and with simple things that gives them a lot of pleasure. One of the simple things is the family, interaction among the people in the family, and 40% say that the quality of the family relationship improved. Again, another consequence for brands this time is that people will be much more cautious in relating to a brand. If the brand is responsible enough and flexible enough to help them during this time, they would probably go with that brand. It's not a matter of being flexible only now in the lockdown. It's about being flexible and understanding after the lockdown is over. So it's a longer term consequence, not a short term only during the urgency times. Others have said that they will become much more careful with, I don't see very well this, will become much more careful and responsible with consumption, and also will be more devoted to their hobbies and passions. Another thing that is common with what Rodney was saying, people are discovering new muscles of their brains and new muscles, physical and psychical, and new talents. And some of them were so surprised of what they discovered about what they can do, they even think about reopening a business more adapted to post-coronavirus context, especially if they work in industries that were very much affected. If we move to the next slide, my next slide, Beatrice.
I did move to the next slide.
We also measured the emotions. We wanted to see how people feel, if there is enough positivity there as they were moving forward to adapt in the crisis. And you can see the positive emotions are much stronger than the negative ones. Only that, as always in Romania, these numbers, the polarization is always so balanced. Like 55% are more positive and 45 are negative. And the positivity comes from the people that are more mature and having families. The negativity comes from the younger part of the society, more of them living alone and single, and especially men. It's not written here, but I will tell you, especially men. We had in the journal lots of young men that were staying alone, and the only thing they did was playing on the computer. But all day, nothing. In the journal, they said, I played at the computer in the morning, at lunch, and in the evening, and then I went to sleep or not. So pretty blocked people in this segment of age, probably because they miss the social life a lot. And there is another slide about adaptation, the next one, that's saying that it's measuring how people adapted to the situation, if they adapted or not. And you can see that it's again 55 to 45, 55 adapted and 45 pretty much in mirroring the data about the sentiments they have about this crisis. And again, family people feel more adapted to the situation than the other ones. But the consumption became really responsible, like buying only things that they really need, searching for solutions to adapt to the changes, and sharing positive thoughts and positive ideas while they connect with others. If we move then again, now we go into the we are getting closer to the trans part. What was growing from March to April is paradoxically, and by paradox, an ability to communicate much better. People felt that during this crisis, they really learned how to communicate much better to the others, because there was a lot of energy, unconsumed energy in communication, and they communicate via online much more often with the people that they really cared about. They called people that they didn't call for a long time to tell them how much they matter. Another thing was the empathy and the understanding grew during this time. We hope it's going to stay with them afterwards. But at least this was a trauma that made them understand the difficult situation of others much better. And the perception that people will help each other more after this pandemic. The decreasing is exactly the negative, the behavior that they didn't expect to happen at the beginning of the crisis, but happened afterwards. People will become more addicted to online. Although we used a lot online, they say that on the contrary, I will be much more organized with using technology than before, because I'm fed up with so much technology. This trust in others will grow. This perception decrease in time, so people really overcome the problem of trust. And alienation and isolation will grow. They don't feel at all alienated or isolated. On the contrary, they felt that the connection, even if they are apart, grew. As Rodney was saying as well, it happens across the globe. So perspective is really improving. Let's move, Beatrice. Thank you. And more positive outlook on the future priorities too. People will rediscover simple pleasure, will be much more creative, and will appreciate homemade and artisanal products more. I was actually having a picture, but I was judging whether to put it or not. A picture from the Profi art shop in Bucharest, if you know, where during the lockdown there was a queue with people distancing 1.5 meters away from each other, and there was a queue that lasted for 2 hours in order to get in the shop. So people were really queuing for buying craft materials. Let's go. We are closing. We are getting close to the end of it. What I want to leave you at the end with, I would like to leave you with 6 thoughts about the discoveries that people had in Romania in this crisis. We are getting too fast. So this is it. And I usually don't put verbatims in our presentations, because I consider as a researcher that you have to deal with the analysis, not with the verbatim, and that the respondent is not giving you the insight by calling a verbatim. But this time, really, this crisis really changed my opinion about verbatims, because people were actually saying things so directly, and you have insights in the way they express about their feelings. So they are so rich that I'm going to use it for this presentation. There are 6 things that I want to leave you with. We have them in the next slide. Let's pass through this one. And the first one is journey to self, but we can move directly to journey to self. One thing that people manage to gain, and it's a direction on a longer term, after the lockdown is over and in the next months to come, and probably will stay with people, is the fact that they discovered how a lot of resources within their life and within their homes. They got introspective. They thought a lot about things that really matter in life or things that do not matter. They say that they would practice meditation and calming and mental relaxation, but in fact, they really had much more time for reflection. They had much more time to express artistically and discover the value of simple pleasure and simple things. And you have there pictures and quotes from the people in our journal. The pictures there are some flowers that one person created, and she said that, look what I did, look what I'm capable of. I didn't know that I'm capable of, and I will give them as gift. And if the feedback is okay, I will launch a business. Although it wasn't any connection with entrepreneurial spirit before that. And there in the next picture, there is a tree that blossomed, and a person was saying that, damn, I've been living here for 2 years and I never watched the sunrise. I was just getting ready to go to work, and I discovered this tree with very nice flowers that was there for all this time, and I didn't see it by now. So they discovered trees that were around them all this time. Let's go to the next one. The next one is amplifying truth. The next slide, Beatrice.
I don't know why you don't see it, because I am on the next slide.
Okay. Okay, the next slide is amplifying truth. I don't see it, but if you see it, I can talk over it. Amplifying truth is all about the all about the trends that we were talking about in the last 3 years. You know, we have this study that is called Hunters. Hunters is actually talking about the changes in people's lives in the last 3 years, and we were worried that this crisis will actually diminish many of them, and they were really good gains for the people. And on the contrary, to our surprise, those trends were amplifying during the crisis, because they were uncovered needs. And while people got time and time for reflection to think about their lives, they also had time to find solutions to fill in those needs. One of them is simple pleasure. There is also empathy. There is clean environment. There is also responsible brands. I will just read the quote there with empathy and authentic connections. Today it was a pretty chill day. I looked around, relaxed. I just enjoying the rain, followed by the isolation rules, and played a game of Rummy with my girlfriend. And I took a dose of relaxation to last me to the next week, and I felt very good. I even got over the fact that I could have my other friends around. So I took a walk down memory lane with my girlfriend and had a moment of true connection. There is another quote there about a person that I will just let you read it alone. It's about a person that was watching the rain, and she saw other people in all the other windows watching the rain together with them. They were watching the rain together. And she noticed some couples holding each other for a minute in a row, just silently watching the rain. So it was a common romantic moment. Okay, let's move in the next one. Responsible leadership. One of the things that came out in our discussions with the people was that this crisis is a matter of leadership. What we learned from this crisis is what true leadership means. And we were very eager to measure the leaders, what people admire to leaders today. And here we have a hierarchy of private people and also business people. So we addressed with this question the business people as well. And what we discovered is that there are role models, existing role models today that they admire, and that the Romanian leadership was really appreciated for the way they handled the situation. Only that there is a new spirit of a leader that comes out, and it's much more relevant in the base part of the society, which is the authoritarian leader. If you can see, there are names like Putin and Băsescu, and in the private people mode part. And what does it tell us? It tells that there are signs of populism increasing, and it's a matter of how you handle leadership today in order to block that. What it does say for the brands is like for example, you might be very tempted to launch very populist kind of campaigns, like heavy promotions and so on. But this might erode a lot the health of the economy and the health of the companies and the industries that you work for. So people are ready to listen to your messages as long as they put focus on the responsibility of recovering the economy and not jeopardizing, actually, out of the need to be popular and flexible, to become irresponsible. So going further, there is another one about responsible consumption, I think. Yes, Beatrice, you see the responsible consumption?
I'm on the rewriting brand reputation right now.
Rewriting brand reputation. Brand reputation, again, was under challenge a lot, because everything we knew about brand reputation before that, like campaigns and image and investment in innovation and being very good, paying the invoices in time and so on, was actually challenged by this, the whole situation. The most important one for business people and for private people as well was the fact that a brand with value today is a brand that is responsible for its own employees, doesn't cut salaries, and doesn't fire people if they can afford that, and protect local environment and support local production and create jobs for the people. So a brand that is valuable today, it's a brand that helps people maintain their immunity in order to be able for them to support economy. Donations were very important at the beginning, but they become really undifferentiating. So what is really important on a longer term is to continue supporting the economical and economical power of the employees and of the society in general, in order to be able to overcome the economical crisis that's going to come. If we can move. The other one is, I think, empathy. Empathy is a very important call for communication. I put there an example that people gave with their own communication, where both the messages and the soundtrack, as it transmits closeness and sensibility, the message was that we can help others by giving light. So it was around Easter. It was very much appreciated, and it came out spontaneously from people that this kind of emotion, the real one, the one that engages people, is necessary today. And another one was also related to the volunteers that brought the willow branches and left them on the door. Another example of empathy, and I understand your emotions and I understand what you need in this very moment, so I'm there for you. And the sixth one, and then I'm closing. The sixth one is the refreshing responsible consumption. Again, we think now, after collecting data throughout the last couple of months, we think that the refreshing responsible consumption will stay with people. For example, you have there some pictures of a garden that somebody had, and they said that usually they called others to take care of the garden, but now they discovered that they can take better care of it alone. And they can also save a lot of money by creating their personal production territory, production garden. And another interesting quote was that this Easter I haven't seen so many promotions or prizes from brands. In other years they could have been completed competed with each other. It looks like they are more careful with money now. I also think that they won't tempt us to go out of the house for a few rounds worth of promotion. Some would have been revolted that they are tempted by tempting the retired people to go out of their houses, since usually the promotions are directed to the retired people and they are much more interested in those. So these are some key issues, key themes that we managed to put together within all this amount of information that we have right now. Things are, we are still writing things right now. My team is working on a more detailed report on trends and what's going to happen. The challenge was really huge for us because everything we started everything from zero. There are multiple elements that need to be researched, or they can deliver a lot of information by being researched, like education, like a relationship with kids, and so on. There are so many interesting findings already in our data. We decided to put them together. On the last slide, you have a glimpse of what's going to happen and what's going to come from our side. We decided to put everything in written, like a social history story, like a story of what has happened in Romania while we were on lockdown. It's called Unlock While Locked, with the support of McCann, and it's available on request whenever you decide that you might need that. This one, the data that you saw today are part of the first volume. New ones are coming. We are preparing now something for understanding what's gonna happen after the lockdown is over. So you guys, if you have any questions, I'm sorry for the technical details. It really worked when we did the training. So, but you know, thank you, Beatrice, a lot.
Okay, thanks, Adina. Yeah, sorry everybody for the technical difficulties that we experienced in the beginning. Sorry, in the middle of the session. It makes me deeply uncomfortable to finish anything late because I'm British and I don't like things that start or finish late, but I'm sure the Romanians amongst us will be a bit more comfortable and maybe have a few extra minutes to spare. So it's great that people have been typing their questions into the chat. I saw that Rodney has answered a couple of them that have been in the chat already. So for everyone else, it's worth just looking at those questions and answers. There's a couple of other questions that we haven't answered that probably make a more interesting discussion, maybe amongst the three of us. So one of them is around this sense of social responsibility and whether people now, particularly in Romania, have a stronger sense of responsibility beyond their immediate circle than maybe they did previously. So Adina, if you want to tell us from a local perspective, I know you touched on a couple of those trends around responsible consumption, and you talked a bit about the empathy. So presumably that does kind of translate here. And then maybe Rodney will tell us a bit about whether across regionally we're seeing an expansion of people's circles, maybe. Yeah. Adina?
Yes. Responsible consumption, as I told you about, it reflects very much on the way they plan to consume in the future. First of all, there is a tendency to focus a lot on the local production and on helping the local producers. They even share information among each other where they can buy greens, for example, or things that are really fresh and safe and well prepared. Another interesting thing is the responsibility is reflected also on watching others respecting the rules. It's like, you know, everybody's a policeman in Romania watching the other one if it's wearing a mask, if it's keeping the distance and so on. And you might even see people, I mean, you know, people in our journal, in our community, all the time they post things about others not respecting rules. There is a community obsession, you know. I don't know. We will see in the next wave. We want to measure this. If people after lockdown is over, they follow the rules. If they feel that others follow the rules, if they themselves follow the rules, and so on. So the responsibility goes in different ways, not just consumption, but being responsible in general for keeping us all safe.
Yeah. Perfect. Rodney, is that something that we've seen regionally about people taking a bit more responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we're witnessing in the region, and especially in the UK, is the sense of concern for those who are vulnerable, and sort of stepping forward and volunteering. You might know that when the NHS put out a call for volunteers, within 24 hours, they had 500,000 applications, and then they reached 750,000 applications and had to close down the platform because they didn't have the resource to process all of those applicants. So really incredible showing of concern and shared responsibility and purpose in this context. And I think that's just a symbol of the types of activities that are taking place around the world. It's just an example of things that are common. People are coming forward and really stepping up and showing their best in most cases.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you both touched on as well was the link to that responsibility, I guess, was around connections. It was one of the 5 things that you highlighted, Rodney and Adina. A lot of your findings are around how people connect to each other in new ways and rediscover old ways of connecting. I know from the previous study that Truth Central conducted, Rodney, the Truth About New Europe study, that the Romanians are particularly strongly affiliated with Europe and they have strong emotional connections there. I was wondering what you both think about how those inter-country relationships will develop maybe as a result of this pandemic, whether it will bring people closer together because we're all fighting the same battle, or whether there's going to be some maybe cracks coming as people have sort of experienced the pandemic differently. So Rodney, what do you think with the global regional view?
One of the things that we've noticed are these fault lines in the impact of the virus on communities. And so what we're seeing in many places are the most vulnerable taking the brunt of the damage, so really becoming the collateral in this battle. And one of those fault lines is a Western and Eastern Europe fault line. And so there's a lot of impact and the potential for impact, particularly in places, and I can't speak directly to the Romanian healthcare system, but in parts of Eastern Europe, the healthcare systems are less developed, less mature, less expansive. And so there's been a sort of dichotomy, a paradox, right? So because of that, many of those countries closed down very early, very strict, and sort of cleared themselves of this initial impact, which is great. But it also is a recognition that the healthcare systems are weaker. And so if there's a second wave or multiple waves, or if there's an ongoing issue, it's going to be a very deep problem for markets that have those types of healthcare systems. Absolutely.
Adina, what do you think from a local perspective? What's the perspective from Romania looking out at the rest of Europe?
What was really surprising for us, that we have this affinity with Europe, which we expressed many times. And another affinity that we have is with the diaspora, with the Romanian diaspora, that we built on in the last years, and it became much stronger and so on. And what was really surprising for us was to see such a beginning of hate or rejection towards the diaspora that came back. Those irresponsible that went out also because they are irresponsible and looked for ways to make easy money and so on, and the irresponsible come back and got us sick and so on, and now we need to suffer. And there was this perception. But in the meantime, while talking to them, the thought and seeing that things were getting a little bit more under control than in other countries, this kind of negative feeling disappeared, faded away. So they came back to the idea that these are our brothers, it's our family, sisters, and so on. So, of course, they need the protection, but at least we took the right measures and things are under control. So, yes, it was challenged. In terms of relationship with other countries, I don't think that they are affected in any way. I don't think that Europe is gets any negative connotations because of that, because we think that you saw that the positivity is a bit higher here than the negativity. And Romanians will never stop exploring other places and finding opportunities in other places. And then, you know, we are different, but in Balkans we like to share experiences and much more extroverted and be much more connected with the world. I don't know about other countries in the area, in Eastern Europe area. I don't think that it's going to be the same reaction. But I think that Romanians will stay positive towards Europe.
It's interesting actually that you mentioned about being naturally kind of explorers, and you mentioned in your presentation about people wanting to connect and reconnect with nature. And one of the questions that we had actually was around people's spending habits and how their spending behaviours and habits are going to change. And I noticed that Rodney had commented and said that actually sales for cruises, I think, are pretty high at the moment, right? And so I was wondering, other than kind of, so you can touch each maybe on the holiday and travel sector, but how else do you think spending will be impacted? I know Rodney mentioned the economic crisis as one of the 4, I think it is, different layers of the crisis, if you like.
I think it's just going to, there's such distortion in the system at the moment. And I think that's what we're going to witness, really perversion of sort of behavior. So I think, you know, when it comes to, you know, we saw this already with the panic buying, the stockpiling, just really random choices. And I think we've sort of moved through these phases of stockpiling where particular ingredients seem to sort of leap off the shelves, sort of in the same sequence in different markets around the world. So, you know, obviously the famous toilet paper stockpiling, and then it was paracetamol, and then we had flours and yeasts, and I believe we're in the hair dye phase, where hair dye is really moving very quickly off the shelves because everybody realizes it's about 2 months and you got to touch up those roots and color. Even Eva Longoria famously has done this online, her own video. So, I mean, I think we're moving through this process where certain things are becoming crucial and they're changing what's essential in this process, and it's distorted. And it's, you know, I think it's amplifying certain needs and also sort of subverting others.
Yeah. Actually, I'm amazed of this uniformity that this crisis has brought in, the problems that the crisis might create to people all across the globe with dyeing their hair and all that. What I know about Romania is that people are expecting the restrictions to go down in order to be able to go out and regain their freedom and breathe fresh air and go to the countryside or to the mountains. And hopefully, most of them hope that they might go to Greece because Greece has handled the situation very well and so on, or even Bulgaria, you know, it goes south. This is the direction for this summer, to go south.
Rodney, you were mentioning that toilet paper and flour was selling out. I don't know if it's true. I think I read that Nutella was the first thing to sell out in Romania, or it was one of the first things. Everybody needs their little luxuries to get them through this time, I guess. I'm just looking for...
I bought a bucket of Nutella.
Pardon?
I bought a bucket of Nutella like that. I never done this before, so it was a premiere.
How much do you have left? How much of it do you have left?
No, nothing. It finished in about 3 days. I didn't supervise the situation.
Amazing. There was another question about the similarity or differences with previous crisis, which I know, Rodney, you've answered. But Adina, you mentioned a little bit in your presentation about leadership and the importance of leadership at the moment. But how much do you think Romania can learn from its previous crises that it's been through?
Hopefully a lot. I don't know if you saw the infographic properly, but the Nicolae Ceausescu was back in the top admired historical figures. Probably a lot. What is interesting is that the most important features of a leader should be the competence and the responsibility and being very realistic about things, not selling dreams that are not actually reachable. And I think that empathy and vision are also things that to be learned, especially for brands. There is an important recommendation for brands to be much more courageous in embracing empathy and vision, because usually, you know, we are rather reactive. Brands are rather reactive than active. And having a vision and being empathic and feeling together with people gives you courage to think longer term and act when maybe there is no profitability in order to get through it. You know, it's like a sailor that goes through the storm. You need to act, otherwise the boat is gonna sink. So, well, I think there are a lot of things to be learned about leadership, and people learn already. So brands should learn as well. I think it's a great moment of it's a great opportunity for learning and creating new rules.
That's one of the follow-up questions is, do you think that democracy will be weakened by this crisis? It's quite a big question to finish on, but
Rodney.
Sure. I mean, I think we're witnessing already the challenge that certain democratic leaders are making to democratic institutions, sort of threatening those institutions with executive power, ways that sort of subvert the democratic will of the people. But I do believe if we look back at crises past, that this is also a rallying cry and solidarity is formed. And you know, there's an emotional journey that we're all on, and that emotion is going to need to be expressed at some point. I think we're all doing a really good job of moderating ourselves. We're going to have to sort of have our say at a certain moment if we haven't done so already. So I do think that there will be that constant dynamism that is democracy, which is you do have to constantly reassert the importance of one's will.
Perfect. Thank you. I did say that was a big question to finish on, but I'm conscious of everybody's time, so we'll finish there. Just a few things from my perspective before we go is obviously thank you to Rodney and to Adina for not just for the presentation for the past hour and however many minutes, but also for the hard work that you've put into making this research possible and for constantly being by our sides as McCann Bucharest in feeding it through to us and ensuring that we can make our briefs and our projects and our work as insightful and insight fueled as possible. So thank you both very much for that. I know it's not an easy time to do research, so thank you for that. Of course, thank you to clients, colleagues for tuning in and listening, and we hope that you found it interesting. And if there was any questions that you had that you didn't have opportunity to ask, then please just come to us afterwards and ask them, and we can follow up with Adina and Rodney as necessary. And of course, we'll do our best to answer them where possible. So the two final things is, one is you'll see this this session, the recording of this session on McCann TV next week. So if you follow McCann Bucharest on any form of social channel, you will have not failed to miss McCann TV. It's obviously a new initiative that we've launched, which has a number of different content streams in it. There's the one which unfortunately I am the face of, unfortunately for you guys, which is the 1 Minute Truth. So if you have topics or things that you want us to discuss there, then please get in touch with anything, and we can factor that into the content that we produce to make sure it's as relevant as possible for the people who are interested. And there's a strategic hack section on there as well, which some of our colleagues at MRM as well as McCann have been contributing some written articles there, which are probably worth checking out. And finally, we're going to launch, or we're going to release a 10 Truths from Lockdown in Romania report as well, which talks about 10 of the things that we've learned specifically from the lockdown and how we think what we think the implications of those are going to be moving forward. So you'll probably also find that on McCann TV in the coming days. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your patience with the tech as well. And we'll see you guys soon, hopefully in a room pretty soon.